Hey everybody, Gurmos here with some more simulator battle action from the closed beta server. And this time I think I got something really nice. The first simulator battle / realistic battle map for tanks in the closed beta. The new map we got for realistic game modes is called Defense of Kursk and brings us what many have hoped for, a large map with pretty long engagement ranges. So I thought I'd make a quick video showing the map and give a bit more feedback on simulator battles. I have done it in the last video of course, but that was on arcade maps, so I think I do some more of it now that we have a proper simulator battle map. Well then, let's talk about the map. Kursk is a pretty open landscape for very long range battles. It of course simulates the real Battle of Kursk, which was the biggest tank battle in history. So as you would expect, there are a lot of tanks on this map, also other AI controlled things like artillery and anti-tank guns. And that's of course one of the biggest differences to a typical arcade map. There are a lot of AI units and the map portrays an actual battle with an objective, the same way realistic / simulator maps do it in the aircraft part of the game. Now the objective in this map is pretty simple: break through the enemy lines and capture the battlefield. And with all the AI tanks rolling around, this looks pretty realistic and atmospheric. Now about the AI units, they are pretty similar to the ones we have on the aircraft maps, like the H111s or the AI Spitfires on the Hardest Day map for example. So they advance toward the objective and they will fight each other and also try to engage you. The anti-tank guns more than the tanks. But as the AI planes on the Hardest Day map, they are as of yet not a real threat. They do present a lot of targets and also create a lot of wrecks, which leads to an interesting part of the game in simulator battles. It is often not that easy to tell which tanks are already knocked out and which ones are not. So it happens quite often that you fire a round into a knocked out tank just to make sure that this one is really knocked out. That's interesting and feels quite realistic. Though I think there maybe should be 1 or 2 extra damage states for knocked out tanks, so that it does not happen quite as often that you have to fire a round into a tank to check if it is down or not. Now, one thing I think should be adjusted a bit concerning AI targets are the anti-tank gun batteries. There are a few small caliber anti-tank gun batteries on the map, and while they don't do much damage, they do start firing at you at extremely long ranges, and those guns seem to be able to spot you a bit too easy and a bit too far out in my opinion. So that you're almost constantly under fire from those things, even if hidden quite well. As I said, they don't really do any damage. But they do give your position away and they are distracting, and it is hard to tell sometimes if incoming fire is from them or enemy tanks. I think they should not fire at quite such extreme ranges and have a little bit of a harder time spotting you. Maybe they should do a bit more damage on closer ranges as a trade-off though. Other than that, the new map is really great, and it is really nice to see Stukas and IL-2s destroy anti-tank guns and artillery behind enemy lines. And while we talk about planes, I think the aircraft versus ground balance currently works the best in simulator mode, with no name tags on enemy tanks, and the pilots of course having to fly in cockpit view and with direct control makes it far more of a challenge for pilots to find and attack ground targets. One of the reasons of course that I want to play simulator battles for planes as well. Not just for its impact on air-to-air combat, but also because I think an IL-2 or Stuka in the ground attack role is the most fun in simulator battle mode. I hope I can bring you ground attack footage from the closed beta soon, though I still need to set everything up. As I've said in the past, I think with tanks, a lot more people that want a realistic experience will skip realistic battles and move straight to simulator battles. And I hope that may lead to more people having an interest in doing the same with planes as well, and simulator battles becoming a bigger thing for both planes and tanks. I think that would kind of send a message that a lot of people really do want a realistic game. Now back to the Kursk map. Since the map is very open and large, the fights very often take place at very long range, especially if you take into account that we only have Panzer IV F2s and T-34 as top vehicles, not Tigers or Panthers with their higher velocity guns, which would be better suited for very long range engagements. Now here on the Kursk map you often have fights at over 1500 meters and sometimes even at 2000 meters, and those ranges can be quite challenging. On the arcade maps we had so far, with the average engagement range of 200 to 500 meters, it was pretty simple to guess the range correct and get a hit on the first try. But on the new map 200 to 400 meters is close range, and once you have fights on a range of over 1.5 kilometers, that's of course something different entirely from what we have seen on the arcade maps. You will quite often need a shot or two to get the range correct, sometimes more, depending on the range of course. The further the target is away, the more your projectile will travel with an arc, and that means that getting the range wrong has a bigger impact. The further away the target, the more accurate your range estimate has to be. That also means of course that your gun's muzzle velocity plays a bigger role for the same reason. The higher the muzzle velocity, the less of an arc you get, and that means you can get away with a larger margin of error when it comes to ranging. That's where high velocity guns like the Panther 75mm L70 gun will really shine, and a good rate of fire also helps, as it lets you fire quickly again after taking a quick ranging shot. Now, in the comments of some of my older tank videos, it was sometimes mentioned that you could not really see a difference in accuracy between the different tank guns. But the reason for that was of course that the range were comparably short, and on 400 meters or less, every tank gun should be accurate enough to hit a tank without trouble. On the new Kursk map, that's a little different, and you really do notice accuracy differences. You really want to avoid a long-range engagement with the T-34 for example. At 1.5 kilometers and above, the 76mm F-34 cannon really is notably less accurate than the 75mm L-43. So that is something you have to take into account. Also, at those ranges the penetrating power of most of the guns is of course much lower. At 1500 meters, about half of what it is on close range. And that makes heat, high explosive anti-tank rounds, an interesting option at long ranges, though one that is pretty hard to use. As most of you know, the heat round will have the same penetrating power no matter the range, as it achieves its armor penetrating capabilities from focusing the explosive power of its shell's HE filler into a cone-shaped metal liner, which is then inverted by the explosive power and basically forms a fast extending metal spike, which focuses enormous amounts of kinetic energy on a very small part of the armor, and this way the armor is penetrated. Kinetic energy from the shell itself is not needed, so it does not matter how fast it is when it hits the armor. At close ranges, those old World War II era rounds are usually less effective than the normal armor-piercing rounds. But on extremely high ranges the AP round loses enough of its speed that the heat round is more effective at penetrating the armor. However, there is a pretty big downside to the heat ammo when you fire it at long range. It has a very low muzzle velocity compared to the armor-piercing rounds, and that of course means it is very difficult to hit with them at long range. Also, when you fire them at long range they come down at an arc of course. That might mean that there is more of an angle to overcome when penetrating the armor. On the other hand, if you fire at a target with an already angled armor, like a T-34, the round coming in from above at an arc might actually help to negate some of the armor angle instead. Now, one thing we don't have as of yet is a proper rangefinder, and I do hope we will get one soon. As I have said already, on arcade maps it is not necessary to have one, but now that we get real realistic maps, it is an important tool that is missing. The most effective way to judge distance right now on long ranges is to count the squares on the minimap, and that's not exactly the most realistic way of doing it, and I hope the minimap spotting gets toned down anyway. I think minimap spotting should, if at all, only be there at very short ranges, or, as I've explained last time, if you specifically order your radio operator to report the position of a target you see. But anyway, a range-finding reticle would be very helpful indeed. Of course, creating the proper historical optics for all the tanks will take a while, I assume, and for me personally, other things are more important at the moment. But until the correct optics make their way into the game, a general range-finding reticle for our tanks would be nice. And as I have said in the past, I would actually like to combine that with Commander's binoculars, because rangefinding was primarily the Commander's job and not every tank had the rangefinding reticle in his gunner's optic. And of course, binoculars is something I would in general very much like to see as soon as possible, now that we get large maps like Kursk, where they would be a very helpful tool. The gunner sight works as a substitute for now, but a proper bino would be far better. Anyway, because of the long ranges and the lower penetrating power of the guns on those ranges, there are in general a lot more shots fired for every penetrating hit scored. That is of course not unexpected, and one of the reasons why I always pushed for a realistic damage model in the two realistic game modes, realistic battle and simulator battles. There is far more work involved in getting the range correct to get a hit in the first place, and if your gun is not that accurate at long ranges, getting the range exactly right might still not guarantee a hit. And because of the lower speed of the projectiles penetrating the armor is less likely than on shorter ranges. Because of all that, I think if you do hit the target and you do penetrate, the effect should be what you would expect from a high caliber anti-tank gun flying through the fighting compartment of a tank. Now, the weapon effect has been increased in the last few patches, and I think it is definitely moving the right way now. Though I think it is still not 100% there yet. Between the two main combatants in this test, the T-34 and the Panzer IV, I would say it looks pretty good, though I think knocked out crew should have more of an effect. As I have said last time, I hope the crew replacement system helps here. Some other vehicles seem to be able to withstand more penetrating hits, even some that are based on the same chassis. I assume that damage models are still work in progress though, so I hope this will change in the future. Now, there is one thing I really have to criticize about the simulator battles in today's test, and that is that there was respawn. The medium tanks could respawn once. Now, I very much hope that this is just a test or an oversight, but that should simply not be the case in my opinion. We are talking about simulator battles here. The most realistic game mode Warthunder has, and I think there should not be such compromises. I know a lot of people see it as a convenient tool to balance stronger tanks, but I don't think that is the way to do it, and there are already problems with this today. For once, the often mentioned revenge kills. Of course, if you get killed by someone and you know where he is, you can pull off the perfect flank on him after a respawn. And the second problem is spawn camping. In a fast tank on such a large and open map, it is very easy to just bypass the fighting and place yourself behind the enemy spawn. There is a simple solution for both of those problems. Don't have respawn. This is simulator battle mode, and at least up here, respawn should simply not be a thing. A more punishing damage model is in my opinion far better suited to balance tanks, and if that is not enough, there has to be another way to balance without respawns. For example, only allow a small number of large tanks in a battle, or make a team that has better tanks smaller to begin with. There's no reason why every match has to be 15 versus 15. Anyway, that really was my only big concern that I had when playing today. Other than that, it seems the game is moving in the right direction, and having large maps for realistic battles and simulator battles is certainly great, and I can't wait to see what other scenarios they come up with. Well, that's it for this video. As always, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.